Welcome to the Parley at the Hindu. I'm your host, Senior Deputy Editor at the Hindu, Sobhana Nair. The Lok Sabha election results came 7 months back on June 4th. The euphoria in the opposition camp after the Lok Sabha results, where they successfully stalled the BJP from reaching the majority mark, is long dead. A lot has happened since the results. After the setback for the Congress and the opposition in Haryana and Maharashtra Assembly elections, questions have been raised on the India bloc. We are deliberating in this backdrop. We are deliberating today on the question: has the India bloc lost its vitality after Lok Sabha polls? I will be joined today by Professor K.K. Kailash from the Hyderabad University and Associate Professor Hilal Ahmed from CSDS. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will start off with a very basic question. Do you believe that the pre-poll alliances, pre-electoral alliances are inherently weak? Professor Ahmed, I think you should start off on this.
I think it all depends on the way we would like to look at the question of coalition. Because in your introduction, you ask a very different, you give us a very different perspective. And coming together of different political party constituting a coalition is something of two kind. One, the pre-poll alliance, and second is the post-poll alliance. But before that, we also have to specifically look at the nature of this alliance that came into existence now. Because this here and now question is more important than the comparative sense when we look at the coalition politics in India. So I would say that if you compare two major alliances in India at the moment, that is NDA and India bloc, you find two differences. One difference is this, that in NDA there is an anchor. BJP is an anchoring party, which would invite all other constituents to come together and form a concrete plan of action, both for pre-poll and the post-poll. The second is the India bloc, where there is a requirement to oppose BJP, but this coming together is based on the logic that no one is in the anchoring position. So this is actually a structural question. Whether it will work in pre-poll or post-poll, it all depends on the context in which the elections are, held, etc. Now, that in that sense, I think that to make a sweeping generalization about pre-poll and post-poll alliances, I think is not going to help us.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Professor Kailash, I want you to specifically deal with historical examples, and if you can take us through how has been India's success rate of a pre-poll electoral alliance in India, sir.
Yeah, sure. I agree completely with Hilal that I don't think the type of coalition actually makes much of a difference whether it is formed before elections or after elections. And I think the question, we need to be very careful, because when we make this distinction between pre-electoral and post-electoral, I think we are limiting ourselves only to one aspect of the coalition, that is the formation. We need to be concerned about what happens after the formation. And when you're talking of stability, I don't think is a function only of formation. So let's take a look at past experiences where we have had pre-electoral coalitions as well as post-electoral coalitions. What you will see is that in both cases, what happens to political parties and how they relate to each other after they come together and how they go about doing their business actually decides whether a coalition is stable or unstable. So if you were to go to past coalitions where they were very stable, for instance, let's take the UPA under Mr. Devagowda or the UPA 2 under Mr. Gujral, United Front under Devagowda and United Front under Mr. Gujral, as well as the UP under the Manmohan Singh government 1 and 2, you would find that they were fairly stable because they had mechanisms which constantly allowed political parties in the alliance to talk to each other, to consult each other, and there was sort of coordination. So I think what happens after the coalitions come together is what matters rather than whether they were a pre-poll or a post-poll. So to summarize, I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The true test of it is what happens in the outcome and how effectively parties sort of engage with each other after they come together. I think that what makes a difference between what you think of a stable alliance and a more unstable or a fickle one.
But, considering the fact that the India bloc has so many political parties with such disparate ideologies, we have Shiv Sena, whom the Congress had specifically in 2004 said that we want all secular parties to come forth for an alliance, but had announced that Shiv Sena should be kept aside. Now, on one spectrum, one end of the spectrum, and the left parties on the other, and there are many regional rivals too in this coalition. You have left versus TMC in West Bengal, left versus Congress in Kerala, AAP versus Congress in Delhi and Punjab. And we have seen in the recent days how Congress has been launching a tirade against Arvind Kejriwal. So therefore, my question therefore is, does the premise that you need to pool all the anti-BJP vote to narrow a meeting ground to sustain a stable coalition? Professor Ahmed, if you can tackle this one first.
See, first of all, we have to understand again, the historical background which Kailash provided is very useful to make sense of this question as well. I think that the question of, I won't say that Indian politics is now completely governed by the logic of ideology. Rather, in my assessment, I would like to call it professionalism in politics. So in professional sense, we have to look at the entire structure of India Alliance very carefully. And we find that on the one hand, we have regional political parties, and on the other hand, there is a party called Congress, which is still, I believe, that it is a national political party. Now, in this context, we have to, look at the interest of both regional players as well as the Congress. Regional parties would like to actually protect their region in such a way that they could have some kind of a bargaining power at the national level. And for that, they need some kind of a support of different actors in different regions as well as nationally. While on the other hand, Congress has, somehow failed to provide a national leadership before the formation of India Alliance and even after that. And that failure has affected the ideological question quite significantly in professional terms. I don't think that I should use the term ideology. But at the same time, we have to look at the dominant narrative of Indian politics that actually came into existence, which Suhas Palshiga rightly pointed out in his various work in the past as Hindutva hegemony. So Hindutva is the dominant narrative of politics. For the first time, Rahul Gandhi's Bharat Jodo Yatra has tried to actually construct a different kind of narrative of politics, which I call a different kind of social justice politics in both caste as well as economic disparity were in the center. Now, the other political parties, they somehow tried to come under that banner, and during the time of 2024 general election, they tried to contribute to that narrative. And in that sense, I think that one of the outcomes of 2024 was that for the first time, the BJP's Hindutva was significantly challenged by the narrative of social justice. And that was the reason why even the social justice were interpreted through the prism of Hindutva by Narendra Modi in various rallies. Having said that, I think then after that, because as I said, that the regional parties would wanted to consolidate themselves in their region in such a way that they could be in a position to bargain at the national level. They did not contribute significantly to the narrative. And as a result, I think that Hindutva became more powerful and assertive. And again, BJP and both BJP and NDA had some kind of an advantage in the way that they started interpreted even the social justice through their established narrative of Hindutva. Now, in that context, the question of coming together and form a set of ideas, again, I'm not using the term ideology, is very important. And as I initially said in my initial remark, that look at the NDA formation. Obviously, BJP is an anchoring position, not merely because it has got power at the national level, but in some state it has got tremendous success. So obviously, the other political parties would find it easy to align with the idea called Hindutva for the BJP. But for the India Alliance, I think, as I said, that if you ask me that what is the most important political document in last 10 years, I would certainly say that Congress Manifesto was a significant political document in that sense. But Congress Manifesto somehow was not accepted by the India Alliance, and as a result, if you look at all the elections that have happened after the Lok Sabha election, the narrative of social justice was, deeply compromised. So I think that the failure of uh, India bloc to come out with some kind of an alternative narrative is actually very crucial to answer your question. For example, the Shiv Sena, how to align with Shiv Sena, how to align with, say, for instance, AAP. You need certain set of ideas, and that ideas were certainly, articulated very carefully during the time of national election. But these ideas actually did not become, other political parties did not come forward to contribute to these ideas. And as a result, the interest orientation, professionalism survived.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Professor Ahmed. Professor Kailash, the reason I started this debate with the question that are a pre-electoral alliance inherently weak is because we see in case of the India bloc that there is a lack of common ideas, as Professor Ahmed just pointed out, or a common ideology, uh, or a common minimum program, as we saw in the previous coalition. So, therefore, I will ask you to address the question whether is it just enough to pool anti-BJP votes? Is that goal just enough to bring any coalition together?
Yeah, sure. Now, this may take some time, but just hear me out. Because coalitions with far disparate allies have stuck together and continued for a term. But remember, this is a government, in government. So, for instance, the NDA 2 under Mr. Vajpayee, which ruled between 1999 and 2004, is a good example where, despite 2002 and the discomfort that it caused to some of the allies, the coalition stuck together until the BJP decided to call for early elections. Now, this is in government. Now, when you look at coalition, comparative coalition studies, this actually very clearly show that the willingness of the opposition to form a pre-electoral coalition increases only when the opposition actors think that the incumbent regime is weak and is likely to be defeated. So I think 2024 gave the opposition such a moment, I think, for them to come together. And once the BJP came to power, I think the moment has gone. So for me, the sticking together of the India alliance is driven by perceptions of the regime strength and stability. So I think that the moment has passed and now we are back to business as usual. It is therefore not surprising that they do not appear together. They look like a fragmented bloc. And we just need to keep this in mind that opposition coalitions will come together only at the time of elections and only when they think that the ruling regime is weak and is ready to go. So I think this might explain what you see in Maharashtra or in Haryana subsequently, etc., where they're pulling in different directions.
Okay. Uh, that's an important distinction that you made, Professor Kailash. Had the opposition coalition come to power, perhaps we would have seen it more. We would have seen some sort of a cohesion. Now, an important question that we need to tackle is, especially more so after the Haryana elections and the Maharashtra polls, in the backdrop of the ongoing Delhi Assembly elections, where all the major India bloc allies seems to have aligned in favor of Aam Aadmi Party and specifically against the Congress, there has been a lot of blame. A lot of blame has been traded, and a lot of uh, a sort of an overwhelming sentiment is that the Congress is the weakest link of the India bloc. Professor Ahmed, do answer this question. And also, we need to look forward to Bihar Assembly elections also, which will come at the end of this year. What are your views on this?
I think it is now become quite commonsensical to equate Congress with its leadership. But when we say Congress, I think Congress has some kind of an advantage in comparison to other players of India alliance, and that is it is still a national party. It has branches all over India. It has local. In fact, at the grassroots level, you find the presence of Congress. Now, in this context, when we say Congress is weak, I think that weakness could have two meanings. One meaning is that, as I said earlier, and I think Kailash would agree with me on that, that you require some kind of a role of an anchor, and that anchoring would come intellectually as well as making strategic alliances at the time when there is no election. So, because there is a lot of obviously Rahul Gandhi, as I said, that both the yatras of Rahul Gandhi were great success in the way that for the first time the grassroots was sensitized, and at the time when there was obviously the 2024 election were around the corner, so the social sphere was sensitized, and for the first time, I think in different regions, some kind of an idea of India was consolidated politically differently from BJP's imagination. In that context, I think if you consolidate that idea and provide, as I said, anchoring role, then the first meaning of anchoring would become very clear, that you have a set of agenda on which you are going to contest election, both assembly as well as national election. The second thing is the weakness term is, and Congress somehow failed to do that. In that sense, obviously, Congress is a weak thing, the weak player. The second meaning of weakness is that Congress, in the infrastructure of Congress is still fragmented, and if Congress is a national political formation, then it should have some kind of a strong infrastructure and unity of command. But if you look at Congress's regional players and the Congress governments in the states, you find that they are speaking very different language. I'll give you one example, and that is, for example, the Congress central leadership is talking about caste census, and they are also talking about economic disparity. But last year, when a proposal was discussed by the cabinet in Karnataka about giving reservation in the private sector, I think the central leadership and the regional players of the Congress did not have any kind of agreement on this question. So therefore, the weak part is that again the infrastructure and organizational structure of the Congress is weak. So if both in terms of ideas and in terms of organization, Congress is strong, then it would be in a position to to provide a leadership role to the other players of India bloc, which it has completely failed to provide. So in that context, it is obvious for other players to have their own interest, have to pursue their own interest and to come out with their own agendas. This which we have seen in which we have been seeing in Delhi quite clearly. Having said that, I think it would be also interesting to look at the professionalism of voter. Now, whenever we talk about coalitions, we entirely focus on political parties, but political parties are also aware of the fact that our voters are quite strategic, And in many cases, they would actually prefer a different political party at the state level. So therefore, I think the professionalism of voter is also crucial when we evaluate different coalitions.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. And that is an interesting point that you made. Professor Kailash, considering the Congress's footprint across the country and the fact that they are numerically strongest opposition party in the Lok Sabha, the India bloc, the other allies seem to look upon it to take the lead often. But we've seen that at times the Congress hasn't taken the initiative. For example, one of the complaints from the allies is that there has been no meeting of the India bloc since the Lok Sabha polls. So, do you agree with the assessment that the Congress perhaps is the weakest link?
Yeah, okay. So let me just take forward what Hilal said, and then I'll come to the Congress issue. When we think of a coalition, I think we should be very careful in saying that political parties are not giving up their individual identities. Okay, so they want to maintain that distinctiveness that they have, and yet come together in that whole. So there is some sort of a common goal that they had. So it is quite natural that we are going to see these common pool problems that we are seeing of them pulling in different directions. Now, this in this case, what Hilal said about the Congress being the leader or more, let's say, the coalition maker, it will seek to sort of protect its reputation. It has a brand value, it has a party label that it wants to keep together. Now, as a polity-wide party or a national party, it also believes that it is more representative of India's diversity and therefore encompassing of society's interests. Whereas the state based political parties or the ones who are coalitionable have very lower stakes. They are more concerned about a smaller pool of supporters and a subset of policy decisions that could be there. And they have a stake only in limited, both in terms of territory as well as in terms of policies. So to put the onus on the Congress, I don't think is being fair. So we are sort of assuming that the Congress should either keep away from the game, or we are assuming that the opposition would do better if the Congress sort of stayed low and sort of gave up everything. And I think we are also making an assumption that the Congress votes would go to those who are opposed to the BJP quite naturally. Now, none of this might work. The Congress is a party in itself. It has its problems. It will have to overcome these problems, and the game will go on. So to put it only on the Congress is the weak one, it's pulling it down. I don't think that's a fair sort of assessment of the Congress as well as of the way in which the coalitions have been working.
Right. But there is also a sentiment which says that the Congress, whenever required, especially in a face off with the BJP, hasn't been able to bring in the votes or the seats. How do you both answer that criticism? Professor Ahmed, what do you have to say on that?
See, I agree with Kailash's assessment that we should not blame entirely on the Congress. But I think just to answer this question, I think if Congress would like to assert its national presence, it should have to work, overtime to to do two things. First, as I said in my previous comment, one, that it should really work on the intellectual front to provide a set of ideas which are acceptable to different regional players. Second, it also has to work on the organizational structure it already has. So I think that is something which is very important. But coming back to the question you just raised about the the nature of contest. I think that it is very, I always look at the question of political participation from two very different vantage points. One is professionalism, which is actually a norm which has not taken very seriously in our public discussion. professionalism of political parties as well as professionalism of the voters. On the other hand, and most importantly, we cannot say that the role of political ideas has completely gone. So therefore, one has to think the assessment of a situation, both when the elections are happening and in a context where there is no election, of these two, how professional politics is going to play out and how certain new ideas are evolved to mobilize people for political negotiations. And somehow I find that there is a lot of emphasis on the question of professional political party assessment of professionalism in politics, but the role of ideas or the emergence of new ideas has not given adequate attention. So I think we have to be very conscious of these two aspects when we evaluate a situation where both the situation, both the context, when you have electoral politics going on, and at the time when there is no election. Remember that election is actually a tool. We have reduced politics entirely to the election. So therefore, there is a time when there is no election. I think how do people think of politics and what are their expectations, both from political parties and non-political players. So if we do that comprehensive assessment, only then we would be able to understand the seed games or number
Right.
games.
Right. That's an important point you've made on the fact that battle of ideas is equally important. But Professor Kailash, it always boils down to the fact that how many seats have you won, and the criticism often directed at the Congress is, for example, in the last Bihar elections, the Congress fought. The Congress's strike rate was deplorable. Um, the examples of Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, where it was in a direct face off with the BJP, is also cited. Um, Therefore, in that context, how do you react to the criticism?
Yeah, some of the criticism is valid in the sense that yes, the Congress has not been doing well when it comes to electoral stakes. But I also think that if the Congress wants to be the leader of this grouping, then it has to act like a leader. One, as Hilal said, that you need the Congress to have an agenda, have an ideological position or an ideas based alliance where it's able to bring everybody on to one platform. Second, again, which he mentioned, you need to show that you are cohesive. So you need to have some sort of commonality within yourself, across units, across leaders. They should all necessarily need to speak in the same voice. I think this cohesiveness the Congress can show, then I think it will go both to the voter as well as to the alliance parties. Leadership and respect doesn't come automatically. It's not given. You have to cultivate it, you have to build it. So I think what the Congress had done during the Lok Sabha election, prior to the Lok Sabha election, was something that was sort of gaining, but subsequently it has sort of given up. So I think that if it were to focus on this, if it wants to be the leader, then work for it. Then you need to put in the extra mile to actually gain that and take it forward. So yes, so that I think is one point I think we should keep in mind. And about the seats, yes, it will come once you are able to present an idea that is different from others, which people think is sort of useful to them, which sort of different from what the BJP has been offering. And I think then the Congress should be able to gain some of the mind space that it has lost.
Great, thank you. We come now to the last stretch of this discussion. And the question that one needs to ask is, does the opposition really need to be in a coalition? And I ask this question specifically in the backdrop of the whole debate that came about after uh, the, the two assembly elections and the ongoing Delhi assembly election, on whether the India bloc is actually a national alliance, or was it also directed at state assembly polls? Professor Ahmed, what is your opinion? Does the opposition really need to organize itself under a unite under one umbrella?
I think again, going back to what Kailash just said, I think it is very important to look at what we call opposition. If the meaning of opposition is simply to contest election and win election, form government, I think that's a very narrow meaning of the term opposition in democracy. Because opposition in liberal democracy, in my view, comes both in terms of opposing, you have to be very clear what you are opposing. So when India Alliance came into existence, there was certainly a discussion that we are coming together on certain principles. And these principles, at least at that point of time when this alliance was actually created, was based on the premise that BJP is somehow authoritarian and the opposition power is rather fragmented, despite the fact that BJP was managed only 37% of votes in 2019. That these were basically the arguments given to construct a set of principle for opposition unity at that point of time.
But on the Professor Ahmed, I
Since
should have also
planning,
asked. Yeah, I should have also asked you. Do you think that
yeah.
regional? This is a battle. The battle against the BJP's hegemony can be fought by the regional players and can be fought on state-to-state basis.
No, this is exactly what I'm trying to say, that, obviously, if it is a national issue, then at that point of time, they actually try to create a certain principle on which a common minimum program was to constructed. But at that, since then, there is no common minimum program. So there is an assumption that we are fighting against BJP, but there is complete unclarity about why we are fighting against BJP. And if because of that unclear premise, that's the reason why at the regional level you have got different kind of for example, Delhi election, they're fighting entirely on the question of Delhi. Now, it does not have any kind of a national reflection. So but look at BJP's we don't know who is going to win this Delhi election. But certainly look at BJP's campaign. BJP's campaign is based on an interpretation which is coming from the national agenda. So since there is no national agenda, I think opposition need to be constructed nationally, and then you have to interpret that national principle regionally. Only then the opposition unity will become meaningful. Otherwise, you have to professionally oppose BJP to form the government, and I think that would be the very narrow meaning of the term opposition.
Right. Thank you. Professor Kailash, I want you to specifically also answer this question, and also in the context of the fact that it seems that parties like Shiv Sena and the Congress with such divergent ideologies, when they come together, they're actually failing their constituencies on both sides. And therefore, the question is, does the opposition really need to organize itself under a single umbrella?
Yeah, actually, this is, I thought, the most difficult question that you actually have, whether the country's opposition should sort of organize under a common umbrella. Let me just push Hilal's point a little more. So we need to make a distinction between the opposition as a normative idea and an empirical manifestation. Very often during elections, we see that empirical manifestation. But I think what happens between elections is where the normative idea actually comes out much more clearly. Remember that the opposition is a very integral element of any liberal democracy, which means that there is the right to publicly oppose, criticize the actions and policies of the government of the day. This automatically means that there is space for a plurality of ideas which could potentially sort of exist. So, between elections, I think we need to focus, and the opposition needs to focus on this normative aspect of the opposition. And this, I think, could happen in a variety of ways. Let me give you some couple of examples. One is that between elections, the opposition could actually do what is called legitimacy informing actions. Basically, these activities might not remove the ruling regime, but will discredit it, will raise doubts about it. one example just to illustrate this point. Take the issue of politics of welfare. Now, I think we have reached the saturation point where the voter, it doesn't matter to the voter that everybody seems to be promising the same thing and finding extremely difficult to deliver. So, the opposition here could simply focus on access to welfare. So, we see that very often we hear your own work, which you saw in UP, for instance, you saw that there are legitimate claimants to welfare who are not able to access welfare. They are sort of kept out because of technology or sort of conditionalities like failure of biometrics and so on. So I think here the opposition could push more for accountability and asking the government to deliver. So I think one needs to focus on issues that have mass resonance. So rather than those issues that focus merely on elite. For instance, I think the opposition for long has been focusing on issues like high corruption, cronyism, etc., which are far removed from the everyday lives of individuals. They galvanize the party, they galvanize the core supporter, but do not necessarily have a hit with the masses. So I think it is the normative dimension that we need to focus more on. And I think each individual party could do it at its own level. There is no need for an umbrella at the moment. And these activities, if they are focusing on undermining the current regime, the legitimacy of the government, I think they can go on. They all need to focus on a long term. It's not just short term, the near term issues that they need. And I think public, the media, the academics themselves focus primarily on government. And I think the opposition also needs to be given its space. So I think they could use a variety of tools that are available with them to sort of get at the government on a daily basis, keep it sort of sustained. And one last point that I want to make here is that I think in non-election time, having a disjointed opposition is useful because it creates multiple sort of battlegrounds for the ruling party. The government will then be forced to address different issues from different actors, and then it gives the opposition more chances compared to just having one agenda constantly being pushed. So I think opposition between elections should attempt to hold the government accountable. And I don't think at the moment there is a need for a common umbrella as such, but if they could work it together, it's great. It will sort of bring in greater rewards over time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Thank you, Professor Kailash, for sparing the time to join us in this debate. And that's all for now from the Hindu, but we shall carry the debate on and we shall see you soon. Thank you.